Good evening. So this is probably the first talk that I've given, proper talk, in a couple of years now. I'm not saying why. So I'm a little bit nervous. Yet I'm an old pro at this, but I think it's one of those things, it's just feeling that excitement, and it's just sometimes overwhelming. But I'm loving being here for many reasons. If you've heard me speak before or been on one of my retreats, can I just see your hands? Oh, fantastic. That's quite one person. One of the reasons I love being here is because I get to be myself. And we all know how that is. You know, around our family and friends, sometimes we might censor some of who we are. We might dim our light a little bit. But I get to be myself here. And I would imagine a majority of you won't be afraid of my spiritual gifts. Whereas, like you've probably already discovered with some of your friends and family, you know, they can be fearful of our gifts. And a great example for me, one of my friends years ago, when she learned that, when I told her about I was learning remote viewing, she fell off my radar for about 2 months. And we saw each other quite regularly, so that was strange to me. And when I finally did track her down, I said, "Hey, it seems like you've been avoiding me. Are you okay?" She said, "Yes, I just don't like thinking of you standing there, watching me go to the toilet." I was in shock. I was like, two things. One, with remote viewing, I can remote view anything. Why would I come and visit you in the toilet with your pants down? I said, if anything, it'll be when you're in the shower. Even though the universe stripped away my sense of privacy with all of the experiences that I've had in my entire life, where I know that the earth is actually layer upon layer upon layer of projected realities, containing afterlife territories, alien outposts, you name it. I don't have that sense of privacy anymore, and I certainly wouldn't try to take it away from somebody else, but truly, I have better things to explore than people going to the toilet. So, other things that I explore, which I really want to sort of just, if you're not aware, just want to share really briefly, but before I get into the main body of my talk, I promise you, I'm going to cover a lot of the stuff that I think you really want to hear, the reason why you're here. But for me, when I do things like astral projection, I know it's connected to everything else in my life, everything. And I know everything else in my life can be connected to my astral projection practice, my remote viewing practice, everything else that I do. So I do my best when I'm not caught up in the matrix through fear to live my life in that very connected way. So one of the things that I love to do that helps people really explore that connection are my synchronicity walks. Has anybody been on one of my walks in here? Again, one. That was a few. So a lot of my synchronicity walks have been filmed. They're on YouTube, and those are truly mind-blowing. I think a lot of the people who come on those walks, they have their minds opened up like some cosmic can opener, and you can't reclose the lid after you've been on one of these walks. So what I typically do is, I do a lot of them in London because London's such a big area, but I have done them in a lot of other small cities and towns as well, because I don't think there's a limitation to this, because I think synchronicity is one of those things that binds us and connects us across all dimensions of reality, including with our loved ones in the afterlife, or the pre-life, if you want to call it that as well. So when I want to do a synchronicity walk, I'll just maybe print up some leaflets, I'll post something on one of my groups online in forums. But the thing I love doing the most is taking leaflets into the city, posting them maybe in a spiritual bookshop on their poster area, or in a not-so-spiritual bookshop, leaving them on train seats, because you never know who's going to see that. And you shouldn't limit it to just places where you think the spiritual people will be. Because I think it's difficult, and one of those things where perhaps we shouldn't be judging other people's spiritual journeys. I think we're all on one, but people themselves sometimes don't know that they're on one. So I'll just distribute this everywhere. And on the leaflet, it'll just say something like, synchronicity walk, let your intuition be your guide as we, walk across the town, the city, with intuition, synchronicity as our guide, magic around every corner, stuff like that. And I'll give a date, a time, and a location. On the night, I'd say 50% of the people are people who have been on my walks before because they really enjoy them. And then there's that 50%, that variable, those individuals who've never met me before. And I know what they're possibly thinking. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what's going to happen. So there's that fear there. And I have this phenomenon in my walks called falling through the cracks, where maybe at some point in the walk, their fear mind takes over too much, and they just sort of make their excuses and they walk away. And that's absolutely fine, to everybody, their own, what they can handle. So I'll just give you one example of one of the walks, just one little tidbit. And what we typically get on these walks is back-to-back-to-back synchronicities. Again, you can watch the videos. It's filmed from start to finish, and it's pretty deep, some of it. So people arrive to the walk, and it's the ones who have not met me before. They're like, is there a plan? Almost every time somebody asks that question, what's the plan? Maybe they've locked up their bicycle next to Charing Cross Station, and they want the plan to include me arriving back with them to that exact point, because that's certainty, and that's one of our core human needs. But uncertainty is also one of our core human needs. That, variables such as the spice of life, variety, surprises. So we're not coming back to, Charing Cross or wherever. For God's sake, I take out my dice and say, this is the only plan, and I roll the dice. And we follow the dice the entire night. Some people make their exit right there because it's just too much for them. So we roll the dice at the very beginning, and that's to get our group number. So say we roll the number 6. Let's say the moment we've rolled that number 6, a man in a football jersey with the number 6 on it walks by. He becomes our white rabbit, and we start to follow him. Before we set off, we'll roll the dice again. Maybe it comes up another 6, and we follow him for 6 whole minutes. Even if he goes into a very awkward place, 9 out of 10 times we follow him in that very awkward place. Even if it's like an elevator, we all cram in. Usually there's 20 or 30 of us. Sometimes there's 40 or 50 of us. We all sort of cram into the elevator, and we stare straight at him, No, we don't do that. I do it. Nobody else does it. And we then will use that number like a synchronicity breadcrumb trail throughout the night. So whenever it appears, we follow it. Alternatively, we roll the dice every time we come to any crossroads. We want to take control completely out of our hands. So we come to a crossroads, we roll the dice again, and the dice guides us in direction. So on one of these nights, we wound up through meaningful coincidence, which is synchronicity, in Leicester Square. And then we entered, rolling the dice, into Soho in London. And we were developing beyond the numbers that were communicating with us. We had developed a yellow theme, so the color yellow kept appearing. And we entered Soho, and there was more yellow. There was a man standing in the middle of the pedestrian area with this huge yellow umbrella that he was holding. And it was probably big enough for 4 people to stand under. And it said on it, free healing. So all you had to do is come underneath the umbrella, and you'd do some healing work. And on that night, I think there was about 20 of us, so we all, come under the umbrella, and we just had a good laugh. The guy loved the fact that, all of us joined him on this. And we were with him for a few minutes, did some healing work, had a good laugh, which is very healing. We stepped back, we thanked him, and I said, okay, let's roll the dice to see where we go next. We rolled the dice. Now, my dice are slightly modified. They don't just have numbers on them anymore. They also have arrows, and they say things like, follow the white rabbit. We rolled the dice, and it said, follow the white rabbit. So we're now looking for somebody to follow. And we don't want to follow the first person we see. We want it to be meaningful. We want this individual to be like a human portal that we can enter in some way, and they'll transport us somewhere. That's how we play this synchronicity game. There are no rules except maybe a few. But so anyhow, we rolled that dice, and almost the moment we rolled it and it comes up, follow the white rabbit, this man walks by with a yellow wig, like Ronald McDonald. Bright big yellow wig. And this is on one of the videos that I've got online. And we were all like, well, that's obviously our white rabbit. We're following him. And it was aliens, obviously. So we start to follow this guy, 20 of us. And the key is not to let the white rabbit know that they're being followed. So if we're following behind him and they turn around, we're like, look at this beautiful architecture over here. And then they start walking again. And so he only walked for maybe 30 seconds before he goes over to a buzzer and bzzz. And so there are retail shops down below, and because this is London, so it's retail shops, and then above there are some flats. So bzzz, and somebody lets him in, he goes in, and somehow my foot manages to get in the door before it closes, and I was like to everybody, follow that man. And so all 20 of us go inside, and he's going up these steps to I think it was the second floor landing, and we're all following behind him. He got up to the second floor landing, and he goes up to this door, knocks on this door, and we're all there. He doesn't even know we're there yet. We're just like mice. We're just watching. And this woman opens the door, and it became very clear this was a brothel. It was a brothel, and she was a madam, and she saw us before he did. She was like, I know she was calculating in her head, this is going to be a big night for us. Voyeurism the works. And it's the shock on her face, I think, that finally got him to turn around, and he's like, ah! And when our cover is foiled by the white rabbit, I will then come usually with this little rambling of about 10 seconds. Let's say, we've been rolling dice all night. It's all about meaningful coincidence, and the dice we rolled, and then you, and we had the color yellow, and then you with and he was like really, things were falling into place. And he looked back at the madam, and he goes, I'm really sorry, but I'm going with them. Again, we have this need for certainty. He had a certain, she was a sure thing. He was getting laid, all right? But he went with uncertainty instead. And this is what I think, sometimes we get in that fear mind, that false ego consciousness, that artificial intelligence, which is not who we are. And when the fear comes, we need certainty. We need to know that, if somebody's got our back. We need to know that we can pay our bills. We need to know, whatever it is that we need to be certain about. But we also need that spice, like I said earlier. And he chose that. And we didn't let him down, I can assure you. We wound up in M&M world later that night. We had all kinds of crazy stuff take place. And it was as deep as most of the synchronicity walks that I do. So we've got that. That's another aspect of the things that I do, and it all, again, ties together. Because when I'm not taking myself too seriously on this dimension of reality in my earthly body, you can bet I'm being a bit of a trickster sometimes on other dimensions. I'm not always taking myself seriously there, and I might be making somebody else laugh who's having a hard time in another dimension. And I think when we understand how interconnected all of this actually is, which I'm going to properly frame for you, hopefully for maybe the first time in this incarnation of yours. You've just forgotten. For those of you who a lot of this sounds new to, you've just forgotten. We have this internal essence that survives death and precedes birth. And so we've been here many times. We've been there many times. And we've been elsewhere many times. Another thing that I really enjoy is when I walk into rooms like this, It doesn't have to be a room like this. I mean, I know most of you are aliens in this room anyway, but maybe when I walk into, maybe I enter a train, I board a train, and I've got my X-ray multidimensional reality vision on, and I'm like, yep, alien, Matrix person. Where do I want to sit? And it's not exactly like a judgment, but it's just like, but how am I feeling today? What need do I need to get met today? Or can I feel somebody else's need needs to be met right now? So it's really good, really special as far as I'm concerned, to get to a point in life where you can sense other people's energy, you can sense their needs, you can be more transparent to where they're at. And my wife and I, Sky, who gave a profound talk yesterday, I loved the panel discussion today. I thought everybody on the panel discussion was just absolutely brilliant individuals. But Sky and I, we have a shared language. We study similar things, especially with the emotional intelligences. And so we can understand each other, I think, better than we were able to understand our previous boyfriends and girlfriends. And it's a real powerful glue for us to have that sort of shared experience in some way. But when I feel like, okay, maybe I can't meet her need right now, it's like, well, I guess what the Course in Miracles would say, who's the most sane individual in the room at the moment? That person must give first. And I think if we can look at the world that way, it would be, a completely different world, a completely different world. So I've asked myself, how far can I take this synchronicity stuff? Can I take it to other worlds? But before I try that, why don't I just try it by hitchhiking? So I decided I'm going to go hitchhiking like I did when I was in my teens and early 20s, where I hitchhiked all across the United States, parts of Mexico, a lot of Canada, and probably 50,000 miles hitchhiking in total. And, that's where I had my rite of passage from boyhood to manhood. It's where synchronicity properly first found me on the roads of the United States. But when I wanted to go from one place to another, like from Florida to California, I'd hold up a sign saying California, because I wanted a long-haul ride, not a bunch of short-haul rides. Sometimes I wanted to get there. But a couple years ago, when I thought, why don't I go hitchhiking in the UK, and my signs will be different because I don't want to go anywhere in particular. I want somebody to roll down the window and say, hey, where are you going? I'll be like, I don't know. Where are you going? I'm going to go where you go. All right, get in. So I thought, okay, then I don't need a sign that has a particular destination. So I would put things like the astral planes, So if I'm just holding up a sign that effectively is, okay, it's the afterlife, I'm holding up a sign that says the astral planes, it's going to cut out a lot of people who want to talk about football the whole time or politics. All right? And we can get to the nub of something interesting within a car journey very quickly. So the very first time, I got the train outside of central London because it's a mess hitchhiking in a city center. So I got out on the train somewhere south of the M25. Well, I was actually on the M25 just going around onto this other junction, and I was holding up this sign, astral planes. This guy pulls over, rolls down his window. Are you trying to get to Gatwick Airport? And I was like, different kind of planes, sir. Different kind of planes. And so he failed the test. I waved him on. This next lad pulls over. He didn't even ask. He just opened the door and I got in, and it just felt right. And I'm not going to share this story because this is a story that I've shared many times. You can find it online if you want. But he was young 20s, maybe 21, 22 years old. And it opened him up. We were maybe together half an hour, and it was probably in my top 10 profound experiences of doing all the synchronicity stuff. It was deep. But like I said, I'm going to just skip that because it's a story in itself. I also study psychedelics. I like to get hold of psychedelics when I can, and I sort of look at them and I probe them and I study them this way. It's the only way I study them. I just sort of probe them, magnifying glass. I just look at them. I don't do anything else with them. That's my way of researching them. So magic mushrooms, DMT, LSD, Mandy, which is also a very mild psychedelic. I've tried a lot of these now, and I've had quite a few DMT trips in particular. And when I have the breakthrough DMT experiences, you're not in the astral planes. You're in very deep, non-human realities. There's nothing human about it. And so I've got really familiar with psychedelics and that journey, really familiar with remote viewing, astral projection, and that entry into these other data streams on these other dimensions, connecting us to these other dimensions. And I give talks on those, and there's this one group that invites me about once a year to come give talks. And the last talk I gave for them was on psychedelics. Now, the interesting thing about this group, there's a nice mixture of age going on in here. In this particular group, almost everybody in the group, the average age is probably 70 years old, so 70, all right? And I find that really fascinating in itself. So I'm giving this talk on DMT, my DMT experiences, and this is happening, and some laughs here and there, some reactions, and then we take a break halfway in the talk, and there's suddenly about 10 of these older folks speeding towards me, There's Zimmer frames, and they're speeding towards me, and I start freaking out. Because I'm thinking, suddenly my grandmother is going to channel through all of these individuals, and she's going to, Sonny boy, what did I tell you about drugs when you were a kid? And honestly, I didn't know what to think. And they're surrounding me, there are about 10 of them, and they're like, where can we get the DMT? So, like I said, I've been a bit nervous tonight, so I think I needed to laugh with you a little bit before getting started. I meditated for a few hours before coming down here. I am probably feeling a little bit spacey. I've not taken any DMT, or anything else for that matter. This is just pure me. And although my 23-year-old son, who I spoke to earlier, he goes, Dad, why don't you just drop some mushrooms or something if you're nervous? I was like, no, because with mushrooms, I tend to feel everybody else's feelings, and sometimes it's nice, sometimes it's not so nice. And I thought, no, I really don't want other people's energy spinning me out like that, because it's bad enough sometimes when you're the speaker, and you're looking at everybody in the audience out there, and some people are like, just give us the facts, We don't want the fluff. Keep your synchronicity bunnies and rainbows. But so it's difficult enough already. But anyway, so I am feeling a bit spacey, but I think that's appropriate for my talk. So I want to start with the question, are we alone in the universe? I think this is a question that's kept most of us up at night, probably since childhood. The thing to understand is this: not only are we not alone in the universe, we are not alone in our own backyard, in the solar system at large. So every single planetary body has a parallel world attached to it, every single one of them. And it's like turtles, all the way up, or all the way down, whichever way. And it's the same with the Earth plane. It is literally layered upon layer upon layer of projected realities. The Earth's moon is a great example. It has more than a handful of parallel dimensions with subtle layers upon layers. Some of these parallel moon dimensions are associated with the afterlife communities. Some of these parallel dimensions of the moon are associated with these theorized alien bases. It's really quite interesting from an astral projection perspective. From a physical perspective, we're all like, with our telescopes, and what was that? And we have these beliefs, but I like to live by, as much as I possibly can, I don't know if it was actually Socrates. I think it was somebody just attributing it to Socrates, but this idea of the three sieves, have you heard of this? Where the first one is, like somebody rushes up to Socrates, I got to tell you this about your friend so-and-so. And Socrates like, do you know this to be true yourself? Oh, no, I heard it from somebody else. Oh, okay, well, Socrates is like, well, he's failed the first civ test. And the second, the guy's like, and Socrates is like, okay, maybe you can redeem yourself with the second test. Is it something nice that you've got to say? Oh, no, your friend did something. Let me stop you there. You failed 2 tests. Maybe you'll redeem yourself on the final one. Is this something I really need to hear? Not really. Okay, don't tell me. And I think obviously this is all about, stabbing people in the backs and this, at the cooler, the water cooler, and, just that sort of energy. And I think it's really nice to get to a point where you're mature enough where gossip isn't your main thing. Because when I visit other worlds of higher consciousness, whether it's connected to our solar system, which there are a few, and other territories in other galaxies, other solar systems throughout the universe, I find on these higher worlds, they've learned how to channel their imagination, whereas here, we misuse our imagination. We use it to psychically attack people. We think about somebody's neck we want to strangle, but that's a psychic attack in a sense, because all minds are joined on a deeper level of being. And we misuse our imagination in other ways. How many times do you find yourself dialoguing in your own head about a situation? That's a misuse of our powerful imagination, which has created everything. We then have a lot of small fears, petty fears, that also get in the way of rediscovering who and what we really are. So, we've got a lot to talk about. I'm very excited. In this talk, my plan is to take you on a tour of the solar system based on my remote viewing and astral projection data. The aim of the talk is to help you get to a point of not needing disclosure from dishonest governments and corrupt institutions like NASA. We just need to learn as a species again to access these hyperspace highways, if you like, through very ancient traditions, plant medicines, as well as modern tools like remote viewing, which ultimately is channeling your senses like your clairsenses, clairvoyance, clairaudience, etc. This is ultimately what we're doing with remote viewing. So as I mentioned already, our physical universe appears to be one dimension within a larger spectrum of energy, which contains layer upon layer upon layer of projected realities. And all of these seem to be taking place, like the old idea of Maya, which is a dream within consciousness. So to me, these are all mental realities. Everything is taking place within the minds of the creators of these realities, which includes us. So I guess you could take this as my hypothesis, but this is based on my own experiences. And my experiences that I'm going to share tonight are experiences that meet certain criteria. If I can debunk my own experience, I will. I'm sharing the stuff that I haven't been able to debunk myself. That includes, I have to know who I am and where I live, where my grounded reality is when I'm out of body, and where my physical body is when I'm out of body. So if I get out of body, and I'm not very conscious, I may know who I am, but I may forget that I've just left my body. That doesn't count. I might have an out-of-body experience which is unconscious. All of us have those every single night. Every time you re-enter a new sleep cycle, and depending on how many hours you're sleeping, you could be having at least 4, 5, 6, 7 unconscious out-of-body experiences every single night. One of the telltale signs of that is what we would refer to as reoccurring dreams, especially in environments that doesn't seem to have a narrative going on like a dream does. A typical dream, the dreaming mind likes to have its narratives. There seems to be drama. If you have reoccurring dreams where it's just places you're visiting, people that you're revisiting, this is probably a sign that your astral body during sleep is acting independently of your physical body, and it is traveling to places that it is highly familiar with in these other dimensions that we call home in between lives. Happens to all of us. And I have a lot of history with my own double life in this way, including with my friends and family. So my wife Sky is a great example because, you know, when we're sleeping in the same bed together, we're in the same house together, when we fall asleep, we're in each other's energy fields. And therefore, we're going to bump into each other on the next dimension up of the house. I remember one time very specifically where we were lying in the same bed together, and I heard Sky get up, and she was walking around the bed, and she was mumbling about being cold, and she was going to go get a blanket. And I could feel it. I could feel I wasn't quite integrated with my body. So my etheric body was slightly out of phase with my physical body, and for a brief moment, I thought I was in my physical body, but then I realized, no, you're not. You're in your etheric body. So I woke myself up into my physical body, and Sky was laying completely asleep in the bed, perfectly asleep in the bed, not up, moving around in the house at all. So regularly, we have these type of experiences. We have things called false awakenings, where our alarm goes off, we wake up, we get up, we start doing routine things, and then in the middle of one of these routine things, we're like, wait a second, I don't have cats. Where did these cats come from? And you're like, oh my God. And you realize you're not awake. And then the real alarm goes off and you wake up for real. Those are glimpses into this glitch thing that can happen between these different levels of who and what we really are. And there's many levels to us, just like there are the many worlds to, physical Earth, physical Moon. One of my big hopes with this talk is to challenge any apathy that you have around exploring the self for yourself. Because no matter what I share tonight, for you, it's still a belief. It's still a belief system. For me, it's a known. Again, I have my own criteria for exploring this stuff. If it doesn't meet my criteria, it doesn't go in my journal. It's just as simple as that. Oh, I don't know how Jedis do that. It gets really hot. So I'm not a scientist. I'm a consciousness explorer, so I use tools like remote viewing, astral projection, lucid dreaming to explore non-physical reality in ways that mainstream science isn't able to do. And I use the word mainstream science because I think there is a covert science that underlays that operates with the higher physics of consciousness, which our worldly physics is but yet a small, tiny subset. I think there is a higher physics of consciousness that some of our governments are already using in their secretive projects. There are experiences that I've had where I've come into contact with stuff which I feel kind of scares me. And some of the experiences I have shared with you, some of you, and some of the other events that you've attended, but I'm really hoping to share a lot of new stuff tonight. Probably 80% of the stuff I share tonight is going to be new to your ears if you've heard me speak before. So just a quick history with my remote viewing and astral projection practice. So it was 1999 when I really got into remote viewing. I was seeking out teachers. I would have loved to have actually learned with one of the actual remote viewers from the Army program way back then, but there seemed to be a lot of big egos in that community, and I wanted to kind of steer clear of that. I didn't want that to cloud my own journey. So I got in contact with someone who I thought really fit for me, resonated with me. I watched some of her videos online, and I really liked her. So I started to compose an email. It was getting late. I wasn't finished. You know what it can be like sometimes. You're composing emails, and it's a bit messy. I'll come back to that tomorrow. I came back to it the next morning, and I had an email in my inbox from this woman. I was like, oh, whoa, she's good. I haven't even sent the email. I was like, she's for me. And then I realized that I'd sent the email by mistake, and it was a mess. And she was like, I deciphered your email. I think you want to hire me to teach you to remote view. And I was so embarrassed. And I wrote back, I said, yes, I would love for you to teach me. And so we organized her flying over here to London, and she was with us for a couple weeks, me and some close friends. And she was the real deal. She was absolutely amazing. We challenged her a few times with targets. She'd do her little cool down, which usually took her 10 minutes, and then she'd jump right on the targets. And she nailed it. I'd never seen a psychic to that caliber in my life, and I knew I made the right choice. So I studied under her for a period of time and started doing my remote viewing practice. And then a couple years later, the astral projection stuff came back to me. When I was a child, I had a near-death experience when I was 5 years old. I fell into a pond. I was under the water for a few minutes, but when I was under the water, I was under the water in another dimension of reality for way more than a few minutes. I met someone who I learned later on in my travels was one of my watchers at the time, someone who looked after me during those years. I then started at age 6, started having spontaneous lucid dreams and out-of-body experiences. And I obviously didn't know what was going on. I was getting really confused because I would have this level of waking awareness within a dream, this level of waking awareness out of my body. And I didn't know what was going on. There were no popular books on the subject that you could just walk into a library and pick up. There might have been stuff with the Theosophic Society, 50 years earlier, but I was 6 years old. What do I know? What am I going to find? So I developed my own language. I had sleepy house and wakey house. Wakey house was when I knew I was wide awake. Sleepy house is when I figured out that this was not wide awake. An example of that might be waking up from my 6-year-old body, walking around the house, going outside, and finding my father standing on the front lawn, yelling into the ethers. And the first time it happened, I thought, I'm in Wakey house, and he's just drunk, and he's just shouting to the neighbors. And then so I was like, oh my God, I got to tell Mom. So I ran to the bedroom, opened the door, and they're both lying in bed. And I was like, I'm in sleepy house, and I have 2 dads. So the confusion just kept growing. And I would eventually talk to my mother about it. My mother was helpful to a degree. She would log information in a journal for me. We'd talk about it to some degree. But when I started having confirmation of some of these experiences, I remember one experience with my father. And again, one of these nights, I think it was a couple weeks later, where I came out of my body. In physical reality, he was a very unapproachable man. He was drunk a lot, he was angry a lot, and he was violent. So you had to choose your moment to approach him. So on one of these occasions where I was in sleepy house, out of my body, and I found him on the front lawn, he was approachable. He seemed to just be at peace in that moment. So I walked up to him in an out-of-body experience, and I said to him, hi, Dad, do you want to talk about anything? And he told me a story about his childhood. So he's out of body, unconsciously out of body. And he's telling me a story. Another level of him is telling me this story. I wake up the next day with this story fresh in my mind from Sleepy House. And I thought, okay, now I have to choose the right moment to question my dad about this in Wakey House. And the time came eventually, and I walked up to him and I said, Dad, do you have a moment? And we talked about this, and I told him about these experiences. And his jaw dropped. He was just like, how can you know this? I've never told anybody this. And it was really powerful validation for me that something I maybe could not properly explain, but something was happening that seemed real. Seemed realer than any fear that I might have been experiencing by this unknown. Something real was happening. And that was beautiful to me. So it carried on for quite a while of my childhood. I remember moving schools at one point when I was 10 years old. Moving into this new school in the middle of a semester, I started getting bullied. And one of the boys on almost the first day tripped me as I was going to a desk, fell over. Weird things flew out of pockets of my pockets, like Star Wars figures, other things that maybe you don't want other children seeing because they're your personal, like rocks and crystals, and they're like, he plays with rocks, whatever. And I remember this child continued to bully me for months and months and months. And it was really starting to heavily affect me. I then had a sleepy house experience, came out of my body, and I think at this point, my guides were really picking up on it, those watchers. And they said, we want to show you something. And I was really familiar with them by that time, by age 10. So this is about 4 years of these experiences taking place. And I was slowly learning this, of what was taking place. And they said, we'd like to take you to another place, which is not this earth, but another earth. And we'd like to show you, in that world, this boy who is causing you trouble, you were actually friends with in that world. They took me there. I saw this. When I got back into my body, I cried. I can still feel the energy of it now. I cried. And I thought, how can we be enemies in this lifetime when we're so close in another lifetime? I started to kill this boy with kindness over the next couple of weeks. He'd normally come up at lunch, at the lunch table. I'd have my lunch that I just collected, from the lunch ladies, and I'd have my cake that I was so happy to eat, and he'd take his finger and shove it in the cake. Are you going to eat that? And literally his finger's at the bottom of the cake, and like, are you going to eat this? Like, not now. In those ensuing weeks, I would sit down somewhere, I'd pick up my cake, and I'd walk over to Glenn, and I'd put it down, and I'd walk back to my desk, where some people might think he was just being a wimp, just avoiding being bullied about it. I knew exactly what I was doing. I killed this boy with kindness at every turn because I held powerfully in my heart what I knew was taking place in a parallel dimension. And I was going to channel that friendship. And when I heard the panel discussion today, and I heard, us talking about our fears about the globalists and, how in another, 8 years we're all going to be happy, in various ways, eating bugs apparently, and whatever else, owning nothing. And I just thought, we have so much under our control still. We have allies that, surround us, Mother Earth, the elements, individuals that we can ally in other dimensions. And that's what I was being to this boy that was bullying me. I was now being his ally in this world because I knew one of these classic, ideas. Well, I know it now, and I may not have fully understood then, but I understand it now. He was in pain himself, and he was causing me pain. It was no excuse what he was doing, but he was in pain. And as the Course in Miracles would now say, I was the less insane in that moment, so I gave first. I gave first. And within less than a month, this boy was stopping other people from bullying me. Within less than a month. And if I would have had a tool like the Ho'oponopono at my disposal at age 10, I'd have cracked that even sooner than that. But I had a 10-year-old boy's mind who was learning about higher physics of consciousness at that age. And it made a world of difference to my life. So, astral projection and remote viewing, we're accessing the same databases, if you like, the same non-physical databases. But with remote viewing, mostly the information is being channeled to you, and you're writing down impressions of the target. There's controlled remote viewing. This is the one where most of us learn about, where pen and paper, you go into a cool down, you go into like an alpha state, it's a relaxed focus state, and you just start to connect to the target and receive data, and you are not to judge that information. You're not to analyze that information. You just allow it to flow and stay out of the way. Hopefully your imagination, which is completely untrained, stays completely out of the way, and you just log the information that you're receiving. With out-of-body experiences, with astral projection, you are leaving the earth plane, and you are visiting another dimension, and you are active in that dimension. If your awareness is clear, you know your name, you know what century Earth. I'll say to myself, I'm from 21st century Earth. Maybe the exact, sort of time that I left my body or near enough when I went into practice. Where my body is, where is it tonight? Is it on the sofa? Is it in the armchair? I'm in the armchair. I'm fully conscious out of my body. What can I do with this? So they're different things, but we can tap into the exact same stuff. So But the issue with astral projection is this. When I come out of my body and I enter one of these more subtle dimensions, a thought can become an instant action. So if I have even the small thought in my mind, boom, it can take me away from where I want to explore. And the physical moon is a great example of that. So when I started doing remote viewing, I would get data, but how am I ever going to validate any of that information, I thought? How am I going to validate it? So I can have a ton of information about moon bases and whatever else through remote viewing. How do I validate it? A few years later, after I started studying remote viewing and practicing remote viewing, astral projection, like a child, came back to me because there was a few decades where it stopped. It just stopped. From teenage years, it just stopped. Up until age 35, when it started coming back, and that was through a lot of practice. I threw a whole year's practice at it before finally getting out of body. Now I got videos up online of 3-hour videos teaching people how to do this, and I get comments in the section that say, I've been practicing for 2 weeks and I can't get out of body. I'm like, come back in 1 year and complain to me, then we'll talk. It's just like, it took me a year to finally do this. It took me a year of regular practice, and then the final, the golden day come, the golden seal was broken. I think a couple days before I went for a walk in the woods, I must have brushed against the wrong kind of plant, a poisonous plant, started getting a rash on one of my arms, got it on my other arm, got it on my torso and my legs, it just spread everywhere, poison ivy, poison oak, I don't know what it was, but it was enough to keep me awake at night for long periods of time. And it is this kind of sleep disruption that can become a powerful tool for exploring beyond the body, beyond the illusory veil that stands between us and reality. Reality beyond this projected illusion. So I wake up in the middle of the night from very disturbed sleep, and I go downstairs and I put some lotion on my body and I lie on the sofa, put on the Monroe Institute Hemisync, and I'm thinking, I'm going to use this and some techniques I'm learning from this other guy named William Bowman, and I'm going to put them together, smash them together, and I'm going to get out of body. And I remember being more focused and feeling energy in a way that I hadn't previously in that year. And suddenly I felt these vibrations. I had an eye mask on. I couldn't see through the eye mask, pitch black room. And I could feel these powerful vibrations. I got really excited. I was like, I know what these are. These are what everybody talks about. They're like a precursor to an out-of-body experience. I was so excited. I then thought, what else can I do? What can I do? What can I do? Okay. And I thought, wait a second, I can see through the eye mask. I could literally see the ceiling. I was like, holy shit, I know I have an eye mask on. So I sat up, and I'm like 90 degrees up, and I'm looking around my room. I'm lying on the sofa, but I'm like, look, oh my God, oh, this is amazing. And I literally just peel away like Velcro from my body. And I'm standing there in my lounge, and I'm like, oh. And this like singularity opens up in my room, in the lounge, and this light starts to pour through, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? So I swear now and again, I think I have spiritual Tourette's. I'm sorry, just bear with the profanity that comes now and again. And then this hand, this disembodied hand reaches through the light, and I'm like, nobody in any of these remote viewing books and astral projection books talk about disembodied hands like that, and it creeped me out, and I was back in my body like that. The fear was an instant barrier to exploring deeper, and lesson number 1. It took me 1 year to learn that lesson, and I was so angry with myself lying there in full paralysis now. I was like, oh, you idiots. And then I thought, no, wait, I'm still in paralysis. I reckon I can do this. And I just started focusing, and then suddenly felt the vibrations again. They were more powerful than the first time. And again, I sat up. And this time, though, I was looking around for hands and light, and there wasn't anything. So again, I peeled away from my body, and I was standing there. And moments later, the light came back. Moment later, the hand came back. Somebody asked me before the beginning of this talk, he said, I know you're going to have a Q&A, but I'm a bit shy. I don't really want to be on camera. Can I ask a question about when I'm lying there and somebody's hand touches me and they're tugging on me? First thing I said was the most sane thing I could say to him. It was a helper. It wasn't a shadow person. It wasn't some weird entity that wanted to, the succubus, incubus, all these other crazy things. It was a helper. 99.9% of the time, it's going to be a helper. and they're trying to help you. So I didn't know that at the time that the hand was there, but I was like, I have to trust this. So I put out my hand, and it took my hand, and it literally just, with a nice firm grip, moved me further away from my body, because what I didn't know at that time was if you're too close to the, I guess what you could call the etheric dimension, you won't go very far. In your etheric body, it's not designed for, well, you can have like a projected duplicate of your etheric body and your astral body, but the immediate energy body that's attached to the physical body through various energy points is not meant to go very far. You'll be like a rubber band snapping back if you're in that body and you try to go very far. Boom, you're back. So you have to learn to go outside of that and tap into another part of you. And that's what they were showing me on that occasion. The experience ended soon after that, but it was enough. I doubled down, I tripled down in that week. I practiced more. I think the week after that, I was out of body 2 times. The week after that, I was out of body 5 times in one night. I was learning slowly how to rekindle what happened naturally for me as a child. Holy crap. So there's aliens on the moon. Jupiter has... we have time. So you have some background of mine now. Now we go forward. Are you ready? Nobody? Okay, thank you. So, I take associate remote viewing, which is more of a way to, sort of binary system of remote viewing where maybe I can get a yes or no question to something. So, because my point with the astral projection was, the issue with it is there's a big time investment. It can take me half an hour, it can take me an hour to leave my body sometimes. Sometimes I don't leave it at all. It can be days, nothing happens. So it's a big investment. If I want to target the moon with astral projection, it's precious time for me. So I will start with remote viewing. I'll start with ARV in particular, associate remote viewing. I'll make a big target pool for myself, maybe 100 targets, Nibiru, Hollow Earth, alien bases on the moon, Area 51, as the Queen of Lizard, all kinds of stuff. Put it in the target, seal them up, don't put any identification on the outside of the envelope. I have to have a minimum of 100 because this is not the best practice for remote viewing. But when you're operating on your own and you maybe don't trust a lot of other people, you really have to figure out how to do this. So I thought the associate remote viewing is my best way to get very verifiable data, perhaps. So I might pick one of the targets. I don't need an identification like they do in the old Army programs and things like that, because just the intention entangles me to that target now. That's all I need. I know I'm entangled to that target through my intention. So whatever is in there, I can connect to it. So I just do my binary remote viewing system to get a yes or no answer. Yes is written on the front, no is written on the back of the envelope, and I'm in a completely pitch black room, and I might have 10 targets lined up, and pitch black room, I might even have an eye mask on, and I just have a pen in my hand, and I'm just connecting with the target for each one of these, and then it's a yes or no sensation that I get that I've developed for myself. And then I'll, in the dark, just make a slight little mark on the side that feels appropriate. After I've remote viewed one of those targets a minimum of 10 times, I'll then look at them, I'll look at the outside of the envelope, and I'll do the math. If one target is 9 yeses, 1 no, I open up that envelope. And then whatever's in there, I then use my astral projection gift to go deeper into that target. Let's say it's something like, Mars. Were there any ancient civilizations on Mars? And I don't know that's in one of the envelopes. I've remote viewed that envelope 10 times, and it's 6 to 4. 6 yeses, 4 nos. I'm not opening that envelope. It goes back in the mix. Until I get to a point where it's something like 8 or 9 out of 10 times yes or no, that's the only time I open up one of those envelopes. When I open the envelope, I'm like a little kid. I'm like, what's in there? What's in there? Where do I get to go? Because I don't want to chase shadows with my astral projection practice. Like I said, it's practice. It's valuable time to me. So I don't want to chase shadows. Nibiru, as an example, if I don't get a clear, good hits on that, I don't want to waste my time with the target. So opened up one of the envelopes, and it was the moon. And it was 8 out of 10 yeses, there are alien bases on the moon. So it was like, I'm going to the moon. And with astral projection, I'm going to the moon. Now I can validate these targets. I have a tool to validate these targets. So I remember the first few experiences of trying to access the moon. I came out of my body. I had this one beautiful astral projection experience take place. And on the back end of that, I thought about the moon. And I was like, I'm going to the moon. Shot up like Superman. And I entered a room, a warehouse. And it was about this size, actually, from floor to ceiling, side to side. And it was a warehouse. And there was a model of the moon hovering inside this room. So it was a big model of the moon. And I was like walking around this, and all the shadow on the corners of the room, and I was just walking around, and I was like, I'm here for a reason. I know that. This isn't the moon, but I'm here for a reason. I was brought here for a reason. This man walks out of the shadows. I was like, oh, the man in the moon. And he walks up to me, and he was like, this is as close to the moon that you're going to get. I was like, who the hell are you? So I knew who I was, Todd Acamesis. I knew I had left my body. At the time, I was living in Pinner in London. So I was fully conscious out of body. I knew who I was, and so I questioned him, who are you? He goes, don't need to know that, but this is as close as you're getting to the moon. And I was like, this feels like a joke, like a cosmic joke. And before you knew it, I was back in my body. A couple days later, I tried again. I got out. I came out of my house on that morning, walked through a wall, standing outside in the garden, looked up, and sure enough, the moon was there. And I was like, okay, this is going to be easy. And again, I just imagined being there. And literally, it was like I feel like a bit of movement, and then I was there, but it had turned into a cartoon. I was like, what is happening? I was learning by this point, this feeling that I was dealing with a virtual reality in the first place. So I felt, okay, there could be subroutines running here. There could be subroutines that are, when people are getting curious, they could sort of, create these distractions. So I thought, screw it, I'm just going to be persistent. I don't care how many times they do this, I'm going to be persistent. And I think it was about a week later, I went for it again. I was sitting in my chair, I was getting out of body, felt the vibrations, and then as I was just sitting forward in my etheric body, this naked woman came and jumped in my lap and started wiggling around, and I was like completely now distracted with astral sex. Didn't even think about the moon. Didn't even think about my target. I was now having astral sex, and that was it. So my first few experiences of the moon were distractions, absolute distractions. I started talking to other astral projection friends at the time that I'd made contact with, and one was like, that's interesting. I've had some interesting stuff like that. He said, I went out of body one time, and I made this command, take me to the moon, and suddenly I wound up in this office cubicle, and there was a postcard of the moon there, and it said, wish you were here. And I was like, geez, who is fucking with us? Who is doing this? Because it seemed like for sure somebody was screwing with our minds. So some of you have attended my talks where I talk about my remote viewing and astral projection experiences where I encounter U.S. military stuff. I think the first talk I gave here, I talked about that. So in a nutshell, I came out of my body. I was taken to some place where it seemed like a secretive location. I was out of my body, not physically in my body, out of my body. And I was seeing stuff, including a data stream from Mars. And it seemed like in this non-physical government location, they were communicating with physical U.S. personnel on the planet's surface, on the physical planet of Mars. And I kind of pretended to ignore that while I was in this place. And I came back to my body and I was like, that was really interesting. I want to target Mars now. So I started targeting it with remote viewing. I started targeting it with astral projection. And I had some really good contact with it to the point of one experience of finding standing water in one of the experiences. Now, keep in mind, I am not physically standing on Mars. I am in the near Martian plane, like we'd call the near Earth plane. I'm in the near Martian plane of Mars. When you come out of your body into your own lounge on the near Earth frequency, maybe 90% of everything you find will be in order as you expect in your house. There will be about 5 to 10% of stuff which is like a glitch, things that shouldn't be there. But these are thought forms. These are things that are there because you've thought about them enough. Maybe you're thinking about changing something in a house, new carpet, new curtains. And there are new curtains, different curtains hanging in there because our thoughts are things and they create thought forms. And as an astral projector, you have to learn to differentiate between a thought form and something real. So I had to really probe, am I witnessing the etheric version of water that really exists on Mars on the physical level, and this is a counterpart to that, or is this a thought form? What is it? So I have to be able to debunk my own, what I'm experiencing. I have to be able to get into this and really get a feel for what I'm dealing with here. I decided to start teleporting around the planet to get more data. I found a debris field, which was weird. It looked like something was blown up. I found some interesting stuff, came back into my body. A few days later, I entered a lucid dream. And in the lucid dream, I became conscious in a dream, so it's now I'm lucid. And this man is walking towards me. I'm in a desert environment, and he's throwing up these dice in the air, and they were red. And he's catching them, and he's walking towards me without losing eye contact. And he, maybe 2 meters from me, he stops. He says, I see you've been visiting Mars. And he's throwing up these dice. And then he drops them, and they drop on the ground. And he just really kind of menacingly, he's like, I'm sure you won't go back. And then the dream ends. And it really freaked me out. It really freaked me out. Because why would a dream character do that? Why would a dream character know that? It's possible. It's entirely possible. But in my mind, how? Why did it come about? I got up out of bed. My ex-wife at the time, is now taking the kids to school. I'm there on my own. I walk outside to see if there's any post, and there's a little brown package on the doorstep. I opened it up because it didn't have any label, no postage marks, anything. I opened it up, and it's a pair of red dice. It really freaked me out. Now, that could be the biggest coincidence in the world, and I'm not saying it's not. But I'd already had a lot of really interesting things happen from age 5 to tell me that this stuff is more real than any fear that might manifest. So I took it as a sign, even if it was just a great coincidence. I had a brief time travel out-of-body experience while targeting Mars. So this is an astral projection experience. During the experience, I was shown an ancient space battle that took place in the space between Jupiter and Mars. Lots of ships, energy weapons, it was a real mess. I briefly got to see Mars in all its glory, including a landmass with water, a large body of water, and large cities. And then the experience ended. But I had a real deep fear in me that what I didn't get to see next wasn't good. And I had a strong feeling that it was connected to the clear debris that we're seeing on that planet that looks like it belonged to a civilization, an active, communicating civilization. Anyway, I have enough experiences on Mars. I don't have enough time. I have started writing a book titled Around the Earth and Mars in 80 Out-of-Body Experiences. I don't know when it will be available, but more of my experiences on Mars will come. But what I'm really keen to talk about is my biggest experience to date. This is bigger than, I would say, all of my experiences put together, so I'm keen to share this with you. So a few years ago, I had my astral projection and remote viewing sites targeted on Venus. Because in one of those targets that were not, that I didn't know what was in it every time I remote viewed it, of course, in the back of my mind, I knew I created these 100 targets. But one of them came up 9 out of 10 times a yes. And the question inside was, does Venus on any level of its dimensional worlds, including the physical, have any intelligent life? And it came out 9 out of 10 times yes, so I knew I had to target it. So I also started to discover that meditation, prayer, these very intentional practices have a huge effect in connecting us to non-physical beings. Whatever you want to call them, angel, gods, guides, whatever. It seems to be this dimension of reality operates in that way. Meditation, it's, prayer, it's this focused intention. Focused intention with a particular level of energy to back it up can make miracles happen. So I thought to myself, if there is a civilization on one of these, either the physical level, which seems unreasonable compared to what we're shown in the data from NASA, or there could be something on one of those parallel levels. So I thought to myself, I want to initiate contact. So I got into one meditation. I have a particular chair which I love. It's like a zero-gravity chair, and I focused like I'd never focused before. I wanted to make contact if there was contact with anyone, that I could make contact with. And not just any individual, random individual from a society that might be advanced that's connected to one of those Venus worlds, even in the astral. So I focused on connecting some high-level vanguard-type individual, really, who could express a high level of unconditional love, is what I'm trying to say. Over the next few weeks, after I made that connection, I feel I made a connection, and I thought to myself, let's see what happens next. I kind of, in my heart, I thought, if they're there, they're going to vet me. They're going to look at my application. Would I make a good contactee? That's what I was thinking. For the next 2 weeks, I thought any apathy that I have, any apathy that I might have around bypassing anything that could stand in the way, any inner work that could stand in the way of making contact with such, a individual. I checked to see if there was any last vestiges of discrimination in my shadow self. I didn't want to be that, that guy who does interdimensional discrimination or acts entitled to visit a world that is perhaps, possibly, more advanced than I am. I didn't want any entitlement in my energy. I wanted it to be clear and clean. After doing this for a couple of weeks, I got up really early to do my practice, and I felt it. Sometimes you can ask other astral projectors, other out-of-body explorers, you feel things sometimes before they happen with these experiences. I had one experience that took place 2 weeks prior to the out-of-body experience. I felt the energy of it. It was that big. I felt it that morning. I knew something was going to happen. So I got into my practice zone. I got very, very deep into this, made my connection. I felt this pull within my energy field, and I thought, autopilot, let go, surrender to it, trust. I completely let go, and I was pulled. So my energy field, my etheric body, my astral body is now being pulled, and I'm on autopilot. And I stay out of the way, because I learned to do that too. Sometimes we want control. I knew this was one of those moments where I was being guided. I was suddenly, after a flash of light, I was in a room. I seemed to be in a place that I'd not encountered before with astral projection. And in the room walks this very tall, generalized human form. Superficial human form walks into the room. Immediately, I started losing focus. I could feel a duality between my physical body and my astral body. I knew the potential was I was going to lose it, and I was going to wind back in my physical body. Everything went dark. I thought, fuck, I was so pissed. The tall Venetian was then voice was in my head, and he telepathically said, there we are, we've got you. And suddenly I could see everything in the room again. And he said, that's better. We made a few adjustments. We can communicate now. You're going nowhere. It was pretty cool experience. He didn't mess around. He let me know very quickly that this was not a civilization that existed on the physical level of Venus. He said, we are a couple dimensions up, but we exist, and we are connected to your plane of reality, and we are fully aware of everything that happens in this sector. He said, let me show you, as he waved his hand, and from the floor of this room came up this holographic projector. And what I'm going to read to you is pretty exact, because if you read some of the books from astral projectors, you'll have this ability sometimes to then wake up in your body and literally, as if you're still fresh in the experience, write everything down. And I knew he was helping me. When I came back to my body, I knew he was helping me write all this information down. A female voice comes from this holographic projector. 200 plus planetary bodies in this sector. In my head, I now see the physical solar system. And the voice is talking about the 9 classic planetary bodies and all its constituent moons, including Saturn's and Jupiter's, big combination between the two of them. So 200 plus bodies, including some minor planets, including some of the big asteroids, stuff like that. So 200 planetary bodies in this sector that was referring to, that voice. 21,000 parallel and alternative worlds connected to those 200 planetary bodies in our physical system. I knew exactly what they were talking about. So if I come out of body and I can see my physical house or the shadow of my physical house, the mirror version of it, I know I'm in the etheric. I'm now in the etheric layer. If I go up a few layers, I can enter the astral layer of Earth. If I move sideways, I can maybe move into a parallel version of my Earth, our Earth. So I knew exactly what they were talking about. I knew they were talking about the multiple layers to the moon, multiple layers to Mars, multiple layers to the sun, all of it. 21,000 parallel worlds to the 200 planetary bodies in our system. It continued. 8,000 of these projected worlds have emergent life forms. So they're talking about the astral etheric levels across our entire solar system, not our galaxy, not our universe, our solar system. 8,000 projected worlds with emergent life forms. Of these emergent life forms, 50 are active in hyperspace. They were basically saying we have 50 active communicating species within our solar system connected to all the worlds within our solar system between all the levels. We think a majority of it is coming from way beyond our star system when a lot of it is originating right here. It continued, Earth is regularly visited by over 20 plus of these active hyperspace intelligences. Earth is known to more than 4,000 hyperspace intelligences from across the multiverse. Over 4,000. I once had an out-of-body experience to a planet somewhere in the Andromeda galaxy, and they knew exactly who we were. Planet Jupiter. Again, the voices continue. Planet Jupiter and its vibrational counterparts, so its etheric layer, its astral level, its higher levels, its parallel levels, its adjacent levels. Planet Jupiter and its vibrational counterparts form the largest concentration of active hyperspace intelligences in this sector, including several physical moons that support emergent life forms. Planet Venus is a higher dimensional world with intact hyperspace intelligences on parallel and adjacent worlds. Earth's moon is the lowest level manifestation of projected moons connected with the physical Earth plane. I will explain that in a bit, including before life and afterlife communities, as well as emergent life forms and other counterpart levels, including artificially enhanced levels for monitoring the Earth world, which has the highest levels of emergent life forms in this sector. Planet Mars and its counterpart worlds has the third highest levels of emergent life forms, including an active hyperspace intelligence still operating under the planet's physical service. The projector went back into the floor, and I was like on the floor. What the fuck did I just hear? And my now host, my Venetian host, was like, would you like to experience some of this for yourself firsthand? I will guide you to meet a friendly, sentient life form on a parallel level of the planet and moon you call Jupiter and Europa. After a quick flash of light, I was submerged in a vast liquid ocean. Diving deeper into the water, one of my favorite things when I'm in the astral worlds and I visit a world that has water, I am straight underwater. Straight underwater because I don't have lungs. We don't have lungs in our astral bodies. We can submerge ourselves underwater and we can operate there safely and effectively. So I was glad to be underwater on this world. I'm greeted by an aquatic life form that looks like a manatee, which was very intelligent. It kind of telepathically pinged me from a distance, and I telepathically sort of translated it as, hi. It was one of the most cutest moments of my astral projection practice. We then swam together, telepathically communicating. I thought to myself, I wonder if it knows of Earth. And instantly in my mind, it was projecting images of dolphins and whales. I took it as a sign that it was well aware. This was one dimension up from the physical level of Europa. I was now back with the Venusian, fully aware of being in the space. I will now guide you to visit a higher dimensional aspect of your Earth world. In a flash of light, a sensation of movement, I found myself standing in a busy street filled with people. I had an instant thought that I was in one of the many afterlife environments. You're not far off the mark, came a voice from behind me. A woman walked up to me on the street who seemed quite amused by my presence. You're one of those intentional travelers from the physical Earth. It's an honor to meet you, as most of you don't come here in this state. We get a lot of sleepwalkers from your world, she laughed. She then went on to inform me that I had arrived to what you could think of as a post-Earth plane receiving station, where they receive those who are recently deceased from the physical world. If you will look up, you will see the main environments where people reintegrate from their post-Earth plane experience. As I looked up in the sky, I saw 3 massive moons just beyond the planet. Each of these moons contain a mixture of environments attuned to the beliefs of the newly arriving. One of these moons is a higher dimensional counterpart to your Earth plane moon. The other 2 have yet higher counterpart worlds of their own. Asking out of curiosity, I inquired how many souls inhabit the higher dimensions beyond the Earth, as in the whole embodiment of the astral planes, including the higher dimensions. For all the worlds connected to what you would refer to as the astral worlds and above, more than 70 billion. But a majority of them will never incarnate on the Earth plane, as most see it as too much of a challenge. In a flash, I was back with the Venusian host. My host then said, as if reading my mind, there is one of the higher dimensional levels of your Earth's moon which is suitable for you to visit. It has an outpost, as you call it, which has been artificially enhanced and is managed by a harmless enough species. But you don't want to know about that. That's where you're supposed to laugh. You didn't do laugh. Before I quickly go there, Andy, how much time have I got?
You've got about 6 minutes.
When we think of the afterlife, and as an example, what do we think of? We've never been trained to think this way. But what comes to mind? The location of the afterlife relative to Earth. Have we ever wondered about that? I went on a radio show a couple years ago, and in the waiting room, the host came on and said, look, your normal host isn't here. I'm taking over. I'm not really into this stuff, but I'm going to be your host anyway. It was all about the paranormal. I was like, that's a bit weird, but thank you for not blindsiding me on the show. And so we're talking about stuff, and I share some of my experiences. He comes back and says, I got an experience I'll share with you. A friend of mine's died a couple weeks after his death. I was in a dream, and he drove by in a car, opened the door, and said, get in. So I got in. He said, in a minute, I'm going to press your forehead. You're going to go back to your physical body. You're going to wake up, and you're going to call my wife and tell her 2 things. First thing is where she lost her wedding ring. Second thing is a secret, intimate word only I called her and nobody else knew about. Boom, he popped him on the head. The guy woke up in his physical body. He was like, what the fuck was that? He calls the widow later that day. He says, I had this weird dream with your deceased husband. He told me 2 things. He said, he used to call you such and such. She was like, well, how the hell could you know this? How could you know this? He goes, there's a second thing. He said, your ring can be found in such and such location in the house. She said, wait there. She went, found the ring, came back and said, I've got the ring. These things are realer than any fear or any doubt you could possibly muster from your fear mind. We have friends where mother and daughter living together. Their grandfather, the mother's daughter, recently deceased. The daughter had a dream that night of grandfather calling on a phone in the dream and saying, take me to your mother. She, in the dream, took her to her mother, tripped over something in the dream phone disconnected. She woke up from the dream. She went to the breakfast table after waking up, told her mother about the dream. Her mother said, oh my God, I had a dream very similar. Papa called me and said, you have to wake up right now because one of the radiators have just caught fire. She woke up, went into the room where the radiator was that Grandpa told her about. It was just sparking and catching fire. This stuff is real. Realer than any fear, any doubt that you have manifested from your artificial fear mind, your artificial consciousness known as the ego. The Venusian took me to this level of the moon. First download. This is an outpost, not their homeworld, just an outpost maintained because aspects of their collective regularly incarnate into the Earth system. They were talking about large grays. Due to the dimensional differences, their homeworld, it was necessary to create an artificial environment on this higher dimensional level of Earth's moon. Same as for many star beings who have soul groups who incarnate in this system, the large grays experience a distortion when in human form, which causes various focusing issues, including ADHD and dyslexia. I'm not saying all of you who have ADHD are grays, tall grays. Whatever your belief system is about them, put it through the 3 sieves. We're not talking about the smaller grays. We're talking about larger forms of them. And their species seem to have been adapted across many, many fields of reality, across many galaxies and universes. They're not always the same ones. They're an interesting bunch in themselves. It's a whole talk in itself. They embrace the limitations of physical reality, where we forget and take it too seriously. There's more on that, but I want to finish with this one story. I got out of body, and I was formless, completely formless. It was one of those moments where I just did not have a metaphor of a body. All I could see was this beautiful expanse of stars. And it was like, I was just disembodied. One of those stars started moving towards me. It got closer and closer, and I thought I knew what I was dealing with. If I had a body, I would have been on the floor like this. I thought I was dealing with God. Its energy was more than anything I'd have ever encountered it. It could have been 1,000 of our suns energetically. It would have been bigger. I couldn't guess its vibrational existence, its experience. And I formed this idea of God in my mind, and I had this telepathic chuckle. Oh, no, that's not me. It said, I create worlds within the hologram that was already created. I can create whole worlds. I don't do that anymore. Now I tweak things. I add energy where energy could be added. He filled my head with so much incredible stuff that in itself deserves its own book. And I asked him a question, have you met the ultimate creator? He said, not to date. Not to date. But he could create entire worlds. He said to me, but I know the creator that created your earth life system. And I know that there are good things on the horizon. He said, trust me, my little friend. He said, let go of your fears. I will say this as my final statement. And this was to sum up the loving wisdom of this creator God, which is how I'm going to label it, that can be summed up with this one single quote from the Course in Miracles. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal can exist. Thank you. you.